So hey guys, what's up? First thing I want to say before we get into any video here, thank you so much. The support on the community has been awesome in the past couple of days, especially on Twitch and VidMe. But I just want to say thank you. This has allowed me to obviously get this tripod, these mounts for the cell phone camera and whatnot, and I hope you guys are liking the little increase in quality. And the new thing that got this at mono price for $8 after shipping and everything. It actually came out to like 15, but this is the new pop filter for the microphone. So just to give you guys an idea, here's the phone microphone. And now here's this microphone. So I just want to give you guys a very gracious thanks. And, you know, last thing we got to get is the Rode microphone for the phone itself so I can do more out and about shooting without much interference. I do think the mics on the Samsung S7 are excellent. However, I noticed why it's actually recording. It does sort of like its own audio boost thing in the background, and I'm kind of worried that, you know, so I might have to be looking for other software to record with besides the actual built-in camera software. But so far, like the other experiments I've been doing, like time lapses and stuff like that, have all turned out really excellent on this camera, and I'm very happy. So what we're talking about today in this video, have you ever had that one piece of electronics or even a game? Have you played a game that everybody hates but you love for whatever reason? I know lots of people have something like that. But I've never had a device in my entire life that people have ever hated on so much that I just absolutely love. Now, I'm not going to say it's without flaws, but let's talk about it. And it's this guy right here, the Steam controller. The Steam controller, a lot of people hate it. They hate the touchpads and stuff, and they can't get used to it. And I was trying to figure out why I am so accepting of it. Like, why do I love this device? Now, I will tell you I've gotten pretty good at it. However, I wouldn't go play a competitive game with this. Honestly, like, the mouse and keyboard setups that we have are far better than we've ever had, especially the mice. The mice are just way more responsive than they've ever been. And with that, when you compare that to something like an analog stick controller, if I had to play a first-person shooter or something, I wouldn't play it on a controller. I would play it on, you know, on a PC. And as a matter of fact, I'm one of those people, one of those nuts that is like, if I'm going to play something that's going to be online based and it's like somewhat competitive, even if it's not competitive, like H1Z1, I just play for fun. I turn the graphics settings down so I can get as much frame rate to my monitor, so I can get as much information and as low latency as I possibly can. I'm just one of those people. However, why am I so accepting with this? For me, one of the things that harkens back to that I like is trackballs. So as I'm flicking my thumb across, you feel this like kind of like vibration, like there's almost like something turning in there, and it feels just like a trackball from the 80s or something. It's like, it's kind of crazy. And I can, just because I'm from that age or whatnot, it's easier for me to get the idea of the mechanics of the trackball, of the inertia of it and stuff like that. But then at the same time, you got to realize there's a lot of kids that grew up on N64, probably never even seen a trackball. You know, maybe one lucky one had one on a PC or something. And so we're kind of like in that weird gap now where there's been technology around that a lot of people don't know and they're not used to. And when we play games on phones, we're usually interacting with something on the phone. That makes it a lot easier because although you don't have that physical feedback like you do on controllers, you have a visual one on screen because you're actually interacting with something on screen. When it comes to this, you're relied on a vibration feedback to know what you're doing. And if you don't have a lot of experience with that particular device, that's not really going to help. Maybe I was like trying to think, why am I so forgiving of this controller? Why do I like it so much? First of all, I think it goes back to, with me, I like anything that's kind of a challenge. And that's kind of honestly, I like anything that's kind of a challenge. If it wasn't for me needing Windows for certain programs, be able to play certain games and whatnot, in an acceptable frame rate that I personally like, I would be straight up on Linux. I actually like Linux operating system better. It is a little bit harder to understand, but I really love that challenge. This is the type of person that I am. And when it came to the Steam controller, I didn't look at it as bad because it wasn't like an Xbox controller. I looked at it as unique because it gave me a challenge, something to get good at. And for the most part, I did get good at it. Like, I could play most games on the Steam controller just as well as on any Xbox controller. And then the other thing about that is I can play lots of games on the Steam controller I can't play on an Xbox controller, like RTSs and stuff that's not acceptable. Were previously only available on a mouse and keyboard. When I went back and thought about this, I started saying, well, why am I so accepting? And maybe it has something to do with the generation I grew up in. So my first actual game console was an Atari 2600. We're talking about the old sucker that they called the 6-shooter. It had the 6 chrome buttons on the front of it, and what nice wood grain finish, very, very, 1970s vintage. It was lovely, and it had a joystick that came with it. It was probably the best control that we had at the time. It had typically one button on it, which back then any button we just called fire button or fire A, fire B, because everything was fire for some reason. But it had a fire button on it, and you held the controller like underneath. It was a lot thicker than this, and the joystick on the top. And it was kind of weird because when you looked at a lot of arcade machines at the time that had joystick controls, the joystick was actually on the opposite side. So you had to get kind of used to it. And then, like, just speaking of arcades, growing up in the arcades at the time, most arcade machines had very different controls. They had, like, Asteroids was just a set of buttons. You go to Robotron 2084, it was literally 2 sticks. Discotron, it was a spinner that actually went up and down in a joystick. And you had to adapt to these controls constantly in the arcade because almost every game had a different control. Star Wars had like a flight stick that could twist, both Y-axis and X-axis. It was kind of a weird setup. But once you got used to these games, you could see the, and in a weird way, like the uniqueness of the controls helped to fit whatever game you were playing. It made you feel like a pilot. It made you feel like you were actually throwing a disc or something, I don't know, or aiming at something. Apologize. This is necessary. I have to unbox this. Original game cart, manuals, all that stuff. This is what I'm talking about. So this thing came out in 1985 in pretty much LA and New York. And with it, it brought not only Super Mario Brothers and a couple other things, it brought with it its controller for the first time I actually had seen. Now, the first time I ever got a glimpse of this controller was actually with this. This is my old Mario Brothers Game & Watch. And this one was like, I think he was working in a bottle factory or something. And you can see there's like part of the directional pad there, but not the whole thing. And man, these were built really well for back then. It's ridiculous. What happened is me and my brother had gotten this computer. We were playing it a little bit, but then our friends started getting the NES, or we started hearing about it. We didn't see it yet. And then finally, in circa 1986, this local place that we used to rent old VCR tapes at, or old movies at, started renting out video games and video game consoles, and they had an NES. And I think it was something ridiculous for like the weekend. It was like $20, which was a lot of money back then. You could rent a game console for a weekend. And when they gave it to you, they didn't give you anything even nice like this box over here. They just gave you a cardboard box with the system, the controllers, and a whole bunch of wires stuffed into it for you to figure out when you took back to your place. This came out, then eventually one Christmas, after begging a whole bunch, we finally got our NES. And pretty much the same one I have here, except less new because I beat the crap out of it. This one's, yeah, it's pretty much new. So anyways, this thing came out, and every controller since then, it looked so odd. It was weird to get used to because I was so used to other like joystick controls and just button controls and stuff like that. It seemed revolutionary at the time to have 2 fire buttons, which we later on just started getting used to calling them A and B. This thing still feels phenomenal this many years later. I would argue that it's a little bit small, but you have to remember I was a child at the time. This thing was huge to me. But I could still play on this today, no problem, and it feels pretty good. But the point I'm trying to make is this became so standardized across America because almost every kid had a Nintendo. It was just like everybody talks about that one console future. I kind of feel like I already lived it because I almost never knew anybody who didn't have a Nintendo at that point in time. They just kind of took everything over with Mario and whatnot. Mario and Zelda and all that stuff. So, every controller to come out, even to now, is an evolution of this controller. Here is the Super Nintendo controller right next to the NES controller. And you can see, once again, an evolution, obviously. This thing was pretty cool. I mean, we had the Genesis controller, which added an extra button pretty much, but this really forced them to add enough buttons for like things like fighting games and really add more depth. Matter of fact, a lot of games that came out when the Super NES first came out, they didn't know what to do with a lot of these buttons. So like a lot of them just didn't get used for like the first couple years, and then next thing you know, we're filling them all up and doing button combinations to get things done. And then we start getting like PlayStation controllers and Xbox controllers eventually, and then we get the coveted controller everybody loves, at least on PC anyways, the 360 controller. And the 360 controller was nice, but it still had some problems. This D-pad felt nowhere near as good as the original one that we were used to on Nintendo stuff. And this, of course, is an evolution of this. But they made the D-pad a lot better in my opinion. Some people hate it. I don't mind it. I wish it wasn't glossy and more like a matte plastic like we had on the old Nintendo controllers or whatnot. I like the travel on the sticks a lot better. It's a very good controller, but it's an evolution of everything we saw before. Where is the evolution line between this and this? There isn't one. There isn't an evolution line. So there's nothing for you to look in the past to say, I can get used to this because I've used this in the past. That doesn't work, and that's the wrong way to see this controller. It's not an evolution of this in any way, besides it carries some features over, like the thumbsticks and the face buttons. But for the most part, if you grab this thinking you're going to be able to get used to it because you used one of these before, forget it. It's not going to work that way. I think I should make some videos showing how to set this thing up in certain cases and whatnot. It is a little weird that the D-pad is essentially the touch pad or whatnot. It kind of reminds me of the old Turbo Touch 360s, which were kind of horrible. Not that bad on this because I can actually adjust the dead zone on here and do things like set the haptic feedback to give me an actual forcible bump on my thumb whenever I press something, so it makes it feel like I'm kind of clicking a button. And when you compare the battery life of this compared to something like this, it's no contest. Even using the vibration feedback that they now have enforced on this, this still loads longer than the Xbox controller. So anyways, as the lawnmower goes off because it's nice outside and everybody's doing anything, hopefully it's not getting into my recording too bad here. So I'm just going to go on with this while this guy's now decided to start mowing his lawn outside. If you guys have any curiosities about the Steam controller, any questions, you can ask me, you can ask other people. But I will tell you, it's not as terrible. It has a huge learning curve, but if you're up for the challenge, it's a good controller, and I think it's a little bit more rewarding than a normal Xbox controller, just for the fact that there's tons of games you can play on it that you can't normally play. If you're actually a Linux user, it's a little bit more friendly on Linux than other controllers. You know, I've had less problems with it, like linking up and stuff like that. And the other thing is the value. Like $50, you get the controller, you get the batteries, you get a little USB dongle, you get an extender, you get a dock. So if you have to take the dock or dongle away from your computer, or you can just like plug it in directly into the bottom, just like this. And yeah, it works out great. So anyways, guys, let me know what you think about this video. Post some comments down below, upvotes, thumbs ups, whatever. And I will see you guys on the following social media and stuff. Twitter, there's a Discord now. I'm going to leave a link for the Discord in all the descriptions, and all the various other services I go to, like VidMe, YouTube, and Twitch. Alright, so thank you guys for listening, and I will see you later. I mean, look at this box right here. I mean, how much better would the Steam controller have been if it was in space?